بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه ثم أما بعد. So today inshallah we will be talking about Babul Ishfaq, or the chapter on sympathetic concern, and we will also in the session of fiqh talk about al-adhan wal-iqama, the chapter on adhan and iqama. So Imam al-Harawi rahimahullah says here in the beginning of Babul al-Ishfaq, or the chapter on pity or sympathetic concern, he says, قال الله عز وجل قالوا إنا كنا قبل في أهلنا مشفقين قالوا إنا كنا قبل في أهلنا مشفقين. In Surah At-Tur, this describes that this is a statement that the believers will say in the hereafter. They will say, إِنَّا كُنَّا قَبْلُ فِي أَهْلِنَا مُشْفِقِينَ فَمَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْنَا وَقَانَا عَذَابَ السَّمُومِ. Then Allah granted us His grace and protected us from the torment of the hellfire, the smoky fire of the hell. So إِنَّا كُنَّا قَبْلُ, they will say, إِنَّا كُنَّا قَبْلُ فِي أَهْلِنَا مُشْفِقِينَ. We used to be, the translation here, it says, we were previously among our people fearful. في أهلنا, among our people. مشفقين, fearful. And then certainly we just covered the chapter on khawf, the chapter on fear. And if ishfaq is fear and khawf is fear, then we will be basically repeating ourselves. But there is a little bit of difference here. Remember when we talked about al-khawf, or the chapter on fear, and we said that fear comes in degrees, and we said that the first level of fear is just the ordinary fear that's a condition or a prerequisite of iman. If you don't fear Allah, you don't have iman. وَخَافُونِي إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ, and fear me if you have iman, if you have faith. So, and then we said that this is the fear of the believers, and basically introductory fear. This is like the basic fear. And then the fear of the knowledgeable is al-khashya. The fear of the knowledgeable is al-khashya, and we said that al-khashya is fear that is greater in magnitude. It's greater than khawf. Khashya is greater than khawf. But khashya is the fear of the knowledgeable, so they know how to protect themselves, and they cover themselves, or they basically seek to protect themselves. They shield themselves from the dangers they perceive or they fear from, and they know, so they can readily do that. They started out the journey in an armored vehicle, like I said last time, and they don't venture away from this armored vehicle, the vehicle of ta'at and abstention from ma'asi and so on and so forth. They are very close to this. Once they see danger, they just seek protection inside their vehicle, and they shield themselves from that evil. And then we said that this is so khawf with serenity, khawf with composure, khawf of the knowledgeable, greater in magnitude, but it is not associated with fright, like the khawf that is for the basic level, or for the beginners on the path. And then the last level of khawf we talked about, we said that this is a khawf that is khawf al-muqarrabeen, the khawf of those chosen to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or those who were brought closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is the khawf of al-hayba, the khawf of al-ijlal. It's the khawf of divine reverence, the khawf of the awe from divine reverence. And then when you have this khawf, you will have hazar. When you have khawf, you have hazar. Well, we're coming to ishfaq now, because ishfaq is based on khawf. The foundation of ishfaq is khawf. Khawf is the foundation of ishfaq. But ishfaq comes after khawf. Because ishfaq, you will have to have had khawf, and you will have to have developed hazar. Because when you fear from something, you watch it. Like if you fear from some danger coming from that door, you will be watching that door all the time. And if you fear from like a predator, for instance, you will be watching that beast all the time. So you have this hadar, vigilance. You will have this hadar or vigilance all the time. But then ishfaq, shafaqah can sometimes be translated as mercy, right? Shafaqah could be translated as compassion and mercy. So it is this hadar that is mixed with compassion. It is hadar, it's concern that's mixed with empathy. So I am concerned for my safety, for my nafs, for the safety of my nafs, and your safety, and everyone's safety. I am concerned for the safety of humanity. But it is a concern that's mixed with empathy. So that is the difference between basically the preaching from the high horse and being concerned for the safety of your audience or those to whom you are preaching. The preacher, the successful preacher, and the good preacher that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted with wisdom and granted with understanding is a preacher that is showing empathy all the time. I am concerned for your safety because I love you, because that's the bottom line. Why should you be concerned for people's safety if you don't love them? And the default for humanity is that they are the children of your father Adam and your mother Hawa. So you do have this love by default. Yes, you do develop dislike of people and their actions when they commit wrong and when they transgress themselves, but the default, the underlying sentiment is one of love and concern, and that's ishfaq. So Imam al-Harawi rahimahullah here says, al-ishfaq دوام الحذر مقرونا بالترحم وهو على ثلاث درجات. Ishfaq is the constant concern, دوام الحذر. Hazar is that concern and vigilance, to be watching the source of danger, risk. So it is the constant concern combined with empathy. مقرونا بالترحم وهو على ثلاث درجات, and it is 3 levels. So you will have to have, the station of rahmah and the station of khawf, and from the combination of the 2 stations, you have the station of ishfaq. People who do not have khawf from Allah, who do not have concern about the hereafter, they're not concerned, about the punishment of Allah or the hereafter for themselves and for others. And people who, at the same time, do not have mercy, they will not be able to reach the station of ishfaq. It's a combination of the 2. The foundation of this, it is 2-pronged. It has 1 leg in the station of mercy, rahmah, and 1 leg in the station of khawf, fear. So the 3 levels of ishfaq, he said the first level, الدرجة الأولى إشفاق على النفس أن تجمح إلى العناد. الجموح كالجنوح. It's basically to drift away, to deviate, to transgress, to trespass, to step over or the lines, the bounds. So that is جموح. إشفاق على النفس أن تجمح إلى العناد. إشفاق for, and should we translate إشفاق every time? It's sympathetic concern. It's about, the hadar and the tarahum. It's about being, concerned for people you love. People can be being concerned for yourself and people for your love. So we will just use the word ishfaq, right? From here on, ishfaq. Okay, so ishfaq for one's soul from transgressing into defiance. That is ishfaqun ala nafs and tajmaha ila al-inad. Ishfaq for one's soul I am being concerned for my soul from transgressing into defiance. الجموح إلى العناد. And the soul is like this all the time. You will have to treat your soul like you treat an untamed beast. It is, treat your soul like an untamed beast. If a beast that is wild, that has the tendency of basically snapping at any time, if you develop security, if you act like this beast has been permanently tamed, this is exactly like someone, you know, the people who tame lions and the tigers and so on, and all of a sudden they snap, they just remember who they are. The lion, the tiger, whatever, they just all of a sudden remember who they are and they snap. Snapping is not unexpected. It is your fault if you felt too safe around them. If you feel too safe, no matter how long you've been taming them, or you have been in control of them, or you have been their master, or their trainer, their coach, their whatever, you should not feel too safe around them. Because if they snap, will you be able to, get someone to actually, so like someone hears about, if someone heard about a lion or a tiger snapping, will they be surprised? Will they be shocked? No, they will not be shocked. Well, that's who they are. They are wild beasts. And if you thought otherwise, it is your fault. The same thing applies to your nafs. The same thing applies to your nafs. It is a wild beast. Once you feel that you have a comfortable ride and that you are in complete control, it basically can destroy you, overtake you, seize you. So إشفاق على النفس أن تجمح إلى العناد, to have ishfaq for one's soul from transgressing into defiance. And defiance is basically to rebel against the requirements of ubudiyyah. Keep in mind that the nafs, jumuh al-nafs, is endless. The transgression of the nafs is endless. So it is not only that, the beginning of jumuh al-nafs is laziness. It will tell you, I just can't do this. Like, it's too much. You have overburdened me with so much. And that is the beginning. And then you may find an excuse for her, and you may say, yes, you're tired, you're this, you're that. But the nafs does not stop there. That's just the beginning. At the end of the day, the nafs wants to be divine. That's the end of it. That's صفات الربوبية. تنازع الله في صفاته في الربوبية. That is the end for any nafs. It wants to compete with Allah for rububiyyah, for lordship. And that has different manifestations. It does not mean that everyone will say, أنا ربكم الأعلى, like Fir'aun said, I am your Lord Most High. But it will act like this. And it will, أفرأيت من اتخذ إلهه هواه. Have you not seen the one who took for his Lord, his desires for a God or a deity to worship? So that's the end of it. She wants, she wants to dictate to you what you need to do and what you need to abstain from, and she wants to be in full control. Now, so ishfaq for one's soul from transgressing into defiance means that you will always treat her as an untamed beast, and you will always be careful around her, and you will always be watchful of her and her transgressions and her tendencies to trespass the bounds. Then he said, وَإِشْفَاقٌ عَلَى الْعَمَلِ أَنْ يَصِيرَ إِلَى الضَّيَاعِ. Ishfaq for the deeds from being wasted. إِشْفَاقٌ عَلى الْعَمَلِ أَنْ يَصِيرَ. So you have concern for your nafs, you have concern for your deeds also. Ishfaq for the deeds from being wasted. You work hard, and then you get tired because you're working hard. And this is for someone who is actually working hard, who has good deeds, but they are still extremely concerned that their deeds may be all wasted. Imagine what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Al-Furqan, وَقَدِمْنَا إِلَى مَا عَمِلُوا مِنْ عَمَلٍ فَجَعَلْنَاهُ هَبَاءً مَنْثُورًا. We have come to the deeds that they have done, and we've made them into scattered dust. We've just made them into scattered dust, the deeds that they have done. Very possible that you do this to yourself. The shaitan did this to himself. There are two things that will destroy your deeds. One of them comes after. Even if you perfect, the deed all the way until you finished it. And then ujb comes into your heart, or conceitedness, like being too proud of your deed, having too much confidence in yourself, or being too proud of your deed. That's conceitedness. So these are two things that will destroy your deed, one before and one after. The before is corrupted intentions. If you have corrupted intentions, that destroys your deed before you even embark on it. Or during the action, it could destroy it. It becomes a haba' manthur, scattered dust. And then there is something that may destroy it after, which is conceitedness. Or ujb. It's this thing. جموح water fountain. Transgressed. Anyway, everything transgresses.
Except husbands. Except husbands.
Husbands?
Except husbands.
They never transgress? You want to ask them?
Don't start.
So then the person who has ishfaq is always concerned for his deeds, because you do you do invest a lot of effort, time, and so on your deeds, and if you're not really careful, you may end up with nothing. You may end up having invested so much and no return, because the investment was improper for improper purpose, or it has been destroyed afterwards by this ujb or conceitedness. So riya before, that is corrupted intentions. Ujb after, that's conceitedness. These are two things that will destroy your deed. And then he says, وَإِشْفَاقٌ عَلَى الْخَلِيقَةِ لِمَعْرِفَةِ مَعَاذِيرِهَا. Ishfaq for the people. Khaliqa means creations. He means here the people. إشفاق على الخليقة لمعرفة معاذيرها. Ishfaq for the people out of knowledge of their excuses. Ishfaq, this is very intricate. This is very delicate concept. He says that you have concern for the people because you know their excuses. At the same time, their excuses are not excusing them in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, you would not be concerned for them, because if their excuses were valid in the sight of Allah, why should you be concerned for them? They have valid excuses. But even though their excuses are not valid in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're still, you have this pity, you have this compassionate concern for them. You're still concerned for them, and you have this compassionate concern, and you still feel bad for them. It's like they are hurting themselves. It's like your son, your young son, who is diagnosed with diabetes, and every time he reaches for a dessert, you have this ishfaq alayhi. You have this sort of sympathetic concern for him or her, if it's your daughter, because they are hurting themselves. But at the same time that these are kids, and this, they get tempted by sweets. So you feel for them, you feel for their pain, but you are aware, you're knowledgeable of the consequences of their, actions. And that is why you are more concerned for them than they are concerned for themselves, which makes you in a difficult position. You don't, you feel for their anguish and their trouble, but at the same time, you're really concerned for their safety, and you want them to stop, and you do not want them to eat those sweets. Now, given this example, it is just an example, but it is not a perfect example, because it is extremely important for you that you do not think, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would treat us unjustly in any way, shape, or form. It is extremely important for the well-being of your faith and well-being of your iman that you trust in Allah's justice and fairness. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala threatens us of His punishment, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, created the hellfire, it just means that this is still within the scope of His justice. And if you can't wrap your head around that, defer the whole thing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You just can't wrap your head around it. You can't really comprehend it. Defer it to Allah. But defer it to Allah, believing in His justice, believing in His fairness, and believing in His promises and threats. So don't basically dismiss the threats of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Believe in the promises and the threats of Allah, believe in the justice of Allah, and defer the whole matter to Him. You're not the one who will be judging people on the Day of Judgment. What your role here and your job here that you must do is basically to protect yourself and everyone you can protect from that outcome, from being deserving of the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and deserving of the hellfire. Is that clear? So even though the excuses are invalid and their excuses will not avail them from the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you still feel for them. Let's say it's not a child that had the diabetes. Let's say it's a grown man. But that grown man, you know very well, you eat this, you suffer some consequences. You don't take your medicine, and you eat sweets all the time, you suffer from consequences. And it's a grown man, not a child. Do you still have empathy for them? Yes. I mean, it's not like you're going to say, well, they deserve it, they know better. Well, yes, they deserve it from Allah's perspective, yes. You will say that if they get punished by Allah, they will only get punished by Allah because they deserved it, because Allah is fair and just. But from your perspective, that is not your business to say they deserve it, they know better, and to act this way and to preach from, on top of your high horse. But your business is to be sympathetically concerned, and to show that empathy and that concern at the same time. The empathy is not preventing you from giving nasiha to people. And the empathy will not prevent you, if you're the parent, from actually hiding the sweets, or from actually holding your son or daughter from their hand and trying to distract them and sort of putting them away from harming themselves. But at the same time, you will do it with empathy. Can you imagine? You're not going to just basically jerk their hand away from. No, you're just going to hold their hand. You're going to give them a hug. You're going to walk them away from that dessert or from this whatever they are doing, and that is how you should be acting with other people, because it is سوابق الإرادة وأسوار القدر. There is the strength of the resolve, but the fences Aswar al-Qadr, they call them the fences of Qadr, the fences of predestination. So no matter how high the resolve is, you may not still be, you will not be able to trespass those fences, to overcome the fences of al-Qadr. Because the fences of al-Qadr are just completely formidable. They are not, you cannot penetrate them. There is no way to penetrate them. That is not finding excuse in Qadr. That's just understanding the larger picture without finding excuse in those fences of al-Qadr that are not overcomable. That's a word, yes.
Can I just clarify something? Is this regarding like transgressing Muslims or just people in general? Like that, giving dawah to somebody like non-Muslim or a transgressing Muslim, like is this empathy for everybody or?
The idea here is you're gonna be doing this with everybody. They have ishfaq for, he says al-khaliqa, the people, And in general, that's what the Prophet, Allahumma ighfir liqawmi fa innahum la ya'lamun. Were they Muslim when the Prophet said, "Oh Allah, forgive my people because they know not, they don't know"? Were they Muslim? These were the kuffar of Quraysh, not any kuffar. These were the disbelievers of Quraysh who were torturing the believers and fighting the Prophet, persecuting him, despite the fact that they saw the signs and despite the fact that he grew up in their midst, and despite the fact that if you see the Prophet, like Abdullah ibn Salam, you would just believe in him by seeing him. This is a man who grew up in their midst and they still disbelieved in him. They still persecuted him. They still tortured his followers. They still fought against him. And he still at the end said, Allahumma ighfir liqawmi fa innahum la ya'lamun. Doesn't get any, it doesn't get any clearer than this. But at the end of the day, that would not stop you from stopping transgression. The Prophet did fight against the kuffar of Quraysh and other kuffar. The Prophet ﷺ did send his people out to basically fight against the lies of the Romans when they started the transgression. They started the transgression, by the way. And the Sahaba afterwards, they removed the tyrannical regimes that would have otherwise prevented people from worshiping their Lord and enjoying the freedom of worshiping their true Lord. That was within the context of mercy, not outside of it. And like I said, there is a huge difference between war then sparring with troops outside of the cities and in an open battlefield, and then whoever wins the war gets to control dynasties where the geopolitical map of the world was changing like mercury all the time. Dynasties were expanding and shrinking and expanding and shrinking. And if you gain control over a country like Egypt with 5,000 troops, knocking down the Roman troops in Egypt, then you could basically rule Egypt with justice, fairness, and allow the people the liberty to worship their Lord. Doesn't that make sense? The overall cost of the war is basically the believers sacrificing their souls in confronting tyrannical armies that outnumber them by far, to liberate the people and to provide them the chance of worshiping their Lord and having just regimes and so on. All within the context of mercy, all within the context of ishfaq, sympathetic concern. But this is the driving sentiment, ishfaq, shafaqah. Then he said, وَالدَّرَجَةُ الثَّانِيَةُ إشفاق على الوقت أن يشوبه تفرق. The second level, ishfaq for the time from being blemished by dispersion. And we did talk about this concept several times, so I'm not going to talk, much about it. It is basically that any waqt, any time that is wasted not being in jam'iyatul qalbi ala Allah, not being together with Allah, not being in this state of togetherness with Allah, because that is the state of wholeness. You will not be whole unless you are with Allah. Ijtima' al-jam'iyya. So you will not be whole, soul, body, and my intellect, mind, unless the glue of all of this is basically your togetherness with Allah. Once you are detached from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you yourself will have dispersion. You yourself will be torn apart. Soul, mind and body, you will be torn apart. Your heart will not be, in agreement with your intellect, and your intellect will not be in agreement with your heart. Your desires will be pulling you in one direction, and your intellect is trying to pull you in another direction, and then you have emotions and sentiments pulling you in a different direction. All of you will not be together, will be completely torn apart. So this is ishfaqun ala al-waqti an yashubahu tafarruq, ishfaq for the time from being blemished by dispersion. Any time that is wasted away from Allah, not in togetherness with Allah, is a time of tafarruq and dispersion. And it is a time wasted, and you should really feel bad for this time. You should have a funeral for every day, because that's part of you. Every day is part of you. So that is a day wasted. You should have a funeral for that day. And then وَعَلَى الْقَلْبِ أَنْ يُزَاحِمَهُ عَارِض, and for the heart from being obstructed by any impediment. عارض is obstruction, impediment, barrier, hindrance, something that stops you, slows you, something that comes in your way. عارض. وعلى القلب أن يزاحمه عارض, and for the heart from being obstructed by impediment. These impediments come in three different forms. As Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah says in Madaarij, they come in the form of fatra, shahwa, shubha. Fatra, shahwa, shubha. Fatra means what? Lassitude, lethargy. Fatra means time, but a period of time. But fatra here means, a period of lassitude, lethargy. Shahwa, which is, desires, vain desires, and shubha, misconceptions, doubts. So these are the three different things that will basically either distract you, push you away from the straight path, or keep you behind, slow you down. Fatra will slow you down. It doesn't necessarily push you away. You are on the path, but you just become slower. And then shahwa and shubha are the two awarid that will push you away from the path. Shahwa is, desires, not necessarily just lustful desires, but desires in general. The shahwa for mal, the greed for mal. Usually it is used in the sense of lustful desire, but shahwa means desire in general. So basically the greed and so on is also a shahwa. So these will push you away. Misconceptions and desires will push you away. Fatra, which is basically lethargy, lassitude, will not necessarily push you away, but it will slow you down. So وعلى القلب أن يزاحمه عارض وعلى اليقين أن يداخله سبب, and for one's certainty from being undermined by beholding any cause. For your yaqeen, your certainty, you have concern for your certainty from being undermined by the causes. And at the end of the day, that is where that's the problem of people who have no faith. That's the problem of people like, atheists, for instance. Everything for them has an explanation, a material explanation. Whether they're right or wrong, whether it makes sense or not, but they want to give a material explanation for everything. Even ishfaq itself, even these objective morals that human beings have, which they should be looking for their source. The fact that we have compassion as a species, they should be looking for a source for this. And biology does not really provide a source, but they will tell you that compassion is basically a reciprocal altruism. And it is advantageous for the species because we survive together. And we have learned that if I show you compassion, you show me compassion, then we both survive. And it's not a zero-sum game, it's a non-zero-sum dynamic between us within the species. But then, even if you tell them, what about compassion for, that we may show to creatures outside of our species? Donkeys, for instance. What about showing compassion to donkeys? They'll tell you that at the end of the day, we have learned to expand the compassion from family to species, and then you could continue to basically expand that because it will eventually be advantageous. You'll learn that it is advantageous to be compassionate, so you keep expanding the circle. And, but at any rate, the objective morality that we have, this is one of the clear signs on the presence of a God that is not just like a superior or like a supreme intellect. No, a God that is also merciful, a God that does have those qualities. Because if the Creator does not have those qualities, the Creator cannot grant us those qualities, right? So a God that is compassionate will give us compassion, will make us compassionate. Anyway, but the problem with people who have no faith is that they want to look for a material cause, a material reason, so that they are not basically looking for God or trying to find God, because everything for them can be explained within the material world that we live in. Isn't that clear here? And for certainty from being undermined by beholding any cause. Now, certainly, Imam al-Harawi, as Imam al-Qayyim rahimahullah points out, he has this overemphasis on the concept of annihilation, fana, which may be commendable within certain context. Annihilation in perception, you're only watching Allah, you're watching of the people is never obstructing your vision from beholding Allah. The annihilation of iradat, which is annihilation of willpower or desires, like your desires have become in conformity with those of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the Prophet said, لَا يُؤْمِنُ أَحَدُكُمْ حَتَّى يَكُونَ هَوَاهُ تَبَعًا لِمَا جِئْتُ بِهِ. You will have no faith until your desires are in conformity with that which I have brought for you or brought forth to you. And all of this is good. But the Imam al-Harawi sometimes has this overemphasis on annihilation, and sometimes he undermines the concept of asbab. We hope that this is what he means. Whether this is what he meant or not, may Allah reward him for his ijtihad, forgive him for any mistake, but we hope that this is what he meant, that beholding the causes, we hope that he did not mean that we deny the causes, because this belief is a cause for going to the hellfire. Belief is a cause for going to paradise. تِلْكُمُ الْجَنَّةُ أُورِثْتُمُوهَا بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. Here is paradise. You have been granted it because of what you have done, because of what you used to do. So belief is a cause for admission into paradise. This has to be clear to us. These asbab, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who set those asbab to be asbab and means to the ends that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala designated for them. So Allah told us belief leads to paradise. Allah told us disbelief leads to the hellfire. So these asbab, we must believe in the asbab, but believing in the asbab should never undermine our certainty in the causer, in the musabbib, our certainty in His ultimate control, our certainty that those asbab are not effectors in and of themselves. They do not bring about their effect by their mere nature, which is extremely important. You have to understand that that fire does not burn by its mere nature, but by the permission of Allah. If it was not given permission, it does not burn. It did not burn Ibrahim, right? The same, the knife did not cut Ismail's neck, even though a sharp knife should cut, but it did not cut, because by their mere nature, they will not bring about the ends, except with the permission of Allah. These ends were basically tied to those asbab, but the asbab were not given inherent power to bring about those ends. You understand? The asbab are not given inherent power to bring about the ends that were tied to them. This is all the work of Allah. Allah tied those ends to those asbab. But those asbab in and of themselves do not have inherent power to bring about those ends. By the leave and permission of Allah, by the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we should be watchful of those asbab. We should be careful to not fall into disbelief or ma'asiyah, because these are asbab to basically entering the hellfire. And, on the other side, belief is a sabab for entry into paradise. Anyway, we believe in those asbab, we watch them, but we do not believe in their inherent power. We believe that Allah is in ultimate control and Allah is the only effector, and those asbab will only work by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he said, وَالدَّرَجَةُ الثَّالِثَةُ, Imam al-Harawi rahimahullah said, وَالدَّرَجَةُ الثَّالِثَةُ إشفاق يصون سعيه من العجب. Ishfaq that protects his work from conceitedness. Ishfaq يصون سعيه من العجب. Ishfaq that will protect his work from conceitedness. And as we said, two things, riya and ujb. Riya before the action, during the action, and ujb after the action. And ujb destroys the deed, just like the riya destroyed the deed before it came to existence. So ujb destroys it after the action is fulfilled. Or during the action. The ujb can get into your heart while you're doing the action or after you do the action. And he said, وَيَكُفُّ صَاحِبَهُ عَنْ مُخَاصَمَةِ الْخَلْقِ, and protects him from conflict with the people. Protects him from conflict. You have concern for yourself. You have been working on your hearts for so long to basically to take the weeds out of your heart, weed it out, and to improve the soil and fertilize it and make the environment suitable for the growth of good vegetations and good plants. And you've been working so hard. Now you get into an argument with someone. This could be your spouse, this could be your parent, your child, your co-worker, just someone in the street. You just get into an argument with somebody, and then you suffer a severe setback. Just by virtue of being in dispute with someone. By virtue of this conflict, you suffer from a great setback, unless this conflict is to begin with for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have no hazz nafs in this whatsoever. There is nothing self-serving. There is no hazz or basically egotistic feelings that are controlling you in this argument. Your ego is outside of the equation. It's all for Allah. Then yes, this conflict may bring you closer to Allah, not farther away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But once hazz al-nafs gets into the picture, and who will be able to rid himself of hazz al-nafs? That is extremely hard. So unless you're truly sure that this conflict is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're doing it the exact the exact way that Allah prescribed and the exact manner that Allah would love, and for the purpose, and you're extremely, confident that this is for the sake of Allah, then avoid conflict, because conflict ruins, corrupts your manners, and destroys the well-being of your heart. So all of a sudden, now you will have feelings of competitiveness, feelings of envy, feelings of, basically hatred, feelings of this. All of a sudden, your heart will be flooded. Once you get into an argument, you get into an argument with somebody, and then you wish for them evil. I mean, maybe if you're like aqil, maybe not your spouse or not your child, but but some people can even do this with their spouses. But like someone that is not close to you, you get into an argument with someone that is not close to you, and then all the predatorial, the sifat al-sabu'iyya, will start to basically, show up in your heart. Sabu'iyya, predatorial qualities, al-adw, al-kalab, transgression, and so on. And then as-sifat al-shaytaniyya, even envy, they will also creep onto your heart. And so he says that someone who's intelligent, someone who's mushfiq ala nafsih, so someone who has concern for himself, will avoid any argument with the people out of concern for himself, out of concern for his heart. No, I'm not going to get into this conflict. I'm not going to get into this trouble. It's like a business dispute or this or that dispute. I am not going there because I am concerned for my heart. I do not want my heart to be corrupted or my manners to be blemished by this conflict, my manners. Who would be able to keep his manners in times of conflict? Very few, extremely few people. And that is why we should just avoid conflict to begin with. Even زعيم ببيت في ربض الجنة لمن ترك المراء وهو محق. I am the guarantor of a house in the outskirts of paradise to one who avoids argumentation or even if he was right, or even if he had the right to argue. The last one, Imam al-Harawi says, وَيَحْمِلُ الْمُرِيدَ عَلَى حِفْظِ الْجِدِّ. وَيَحْمِلُ الْمُرِيدَ عَلى حِفْظِ الْجِدِّ or عَلى حِفْظِ الْحَدِّ. Depends, some manuscripts had حِفْظ الْجِدِّ and some manuscripts had حِفْظ الْحَدِّ. وَيَحْمِلُ الْمُرِيدَ, and keeps the seeker on this path of purification. وَيَحْمِلُ الْمُرِيدَ عَلَى حِفْظِ الْجِدِّ, and keeps the seeker. حِفْظ الْجِدِّ would be basically seriously committed, seriousness. Jidd is seriousness. حِفْظ الْجِدِّ is to maintain your seriousness. To stay seriously committed. That is what it means, to stay seriously committed, and to not have this fatra, and to not have anything that distracts you, and so on. Basically, the permanency. All of the above, all of what we said above, you need ishfaq to maintain all of this constantly, and to be seriously committed constantly. If you say that it is hifz al-had, it means protecting the bounds or watching the bounds. That during your journey, you're always watchful of the bounds. I think hifz al-jidd is better, which is basically staying seriously committed, because we have been talking about hifz al-had, before. We've talked about hifz al-had before. Now it is time to say that you're watching permanently, constantly. You're staying seriously committed to this watchfulness. And that would be the end of this. Bring us to the end of Bab al-Ishfaq, the chapter on Ishfaq, sympathetic concern, basically concern mixed with rahmah, or concern mixed with mercy for oneself and for all people. قولوا قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم.